Hello and welcome to the Comparesoft ERP Podcast. In this episode, we're focusing on a part of ERP delivery that often determines success or failure, but doesn't necessarily get the attention it deserves, and that's program management. Today, I'm joined by Tanya Last, an experienced ERP program manager who has led large-scale transformations in public sector environments, including the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea. We'll explore what an ERP program manager is actually responsible for, why some ERP projects derail, and what it really takes to keep implementation on track from start to finish. Tanya, hello. It's great to have you on the podcast. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. So, Tanya, you've spent around 15 years leading ERP and wider transformation programs. How would you summarize the role of an ERP program manager? What do teams expect from you?
So it's a great question, actually. ERP project manager is a single person in charge of an ERP program, which is a very complex thing to do. So the only thing that I can compare it with is, an orchestra, and you've got a conductor who knows exactly who needs to do what at what time, how they need to do it. So that person basically instructs different people to do things that they need them to do because they've been doing it for a long time. They know what the good looks like. So it's basically a conductor. And that person doesn't necessarily need to know how to do different things, how to play different instruments, but they know what the good looks like. Does that make sense?
That's a very good analogy, yes. And I'm curious, so where in the ERP lifecycle does that role really begin? And like, how involved are you across design, build, testing, post-go live?
So for me, the role of the program manager or project manager of ERP program begins from the point of time where somebody will say, we need to replace our existing best of breed system or our existing system of any sort, whether it's finance, HR, it could be procurement system independently. I think it needs to be looked at holistically. What I find quite often is where I've been brought in at the beginning of the program, and the project plan is too tight. The team that has been mobilized doesn't have the right skills. So you need to bring the person who knows what the good looks like and what the good products out there, how to go through the procurement exercise, what kind of questions to ask, how to choose the right SI. So therefore, I think that there needs to be a right skills, whether it's an ERP program manager or it could be somebody of similar ilk. It could be a company who would do that kind of role from the very, very beginning to ask the right questions and drive the right processes. Yeah, but I think the other part of your question was the role of the program manager across key phases. It's all the way through. So it starts from the very beginning all the way through. So the program manager needs to be balancing all of the key activities across all of the sessions, all of the phases, all of the decisions, but also at the point of system go live. Quite often I see the project managers will then say, it's been a hard 2 years. Thank you very much. I'm off on my long holiday. But for me, that's where things quite often will go wrong because, there is so much experience that the project manager has had. When they walk away, there is a lot of that knowledge disappears. So you need to kind of see the customer through stabilisation for a couple of months until, the target operating model is stable, the post-go live issues are resolved, and BAU teams are comfortable, managed services are, operating as they should, and things are stable. Then that's the time for project manager to go.
If we stick with your orchestra analogy, you could sort of say you're the one who's printed out the music sheets, put them on top at the beginning. You're the one packing away the instruments at the end.
Exactly. And handing over to, whoever will take over from that point of view. Yeah.
I've had a lot of conversations recently with experts in the ERP field regarding failure rates. So some are putting failure rates between 70 to 90% for ERP implementations. Quite a few insist it's a lot lower, depending on how you define the failure. I'm curious how you see a failed implementation. Like, what do you define it as? Do you agree that figure sits above or below 70%?
It's a very interesting question. And I think that what I wanted to start is the criteria for failure is different for different customers. So it could be, in the private sector, what's deemed a success might not be the success in the public sector, because people are a bit more pragmatic and can deal with a bit more uncertainty. So for me, I think it depends what the objectives of the program are and what kind of expectations customer have. So for me, I worked on the two projects, very, very similar, where you move from one platform to another. One customer deemed that to be a complete success because we've done it on time and money. We've trained everyone. System is live and safe. For another customer, it was complete failure because they didn't feel like everyone has been engaged and consulted, and there was not enough of that kind of fluffy engagement activity around it, even though there was so much good stuff around it. So I think that's the bit that I would like to just make sure people understand. But obviously time, cost, and being safe, that's the key critical thing. So you just need to make sure that the solution is safe. Quite often when you add in time to the implementation which add costs, is not necessarily the wrong thing to do. And it's not necessarily a failure in my mind, because if you need a bit more time, you do need to have it, because quite often the project manager hasn't been involved in the planning. And once you've got all the right, people in and you're looking at your critical path, it's just there is no way to implement the project within that time scale. So for me, adding extra time quite often adds quality and making sure the project is going live in the safest possible way. So adding time and cost quite often is deemed as a failure, but in my mind, sometimes it's necessary.
Yeah, I feel like you can have a good delay. If it's helping put the program go forward, it can be a good delay.
Absolutely. But quite often I also see that, when the decisions have been made, maybe solution is not quite what you expected. There might be a size not quite what you needed as well. So there are a number of things. Once you actually hit the floor running, you understand what's needed to be done. You underestimate the amount of data migration to be done or the complexities of integration. So once you discover a bit more in design, then you need to start assessing the rest of the critical path and say, have we got enough time to implement this? And that's where really strong pragmatic conversations need to be had. We've discovered this, we assumed X, now we've got Y. What do we do about that delta? Is it something we can do as a phase 2? Do we change the scope, or do we implement what we originally planned? And therefore, that we need to make some harsh decisions, or we rebaseline now and say, right, we discovered Y, so let's deliver Y, but therefore we need to replan the rest of the project. So I think that stakeholder engagement, that senior sponsor support, and having the right decisions at the right time is very critical, because if you make those decisions, the project will never fail.
And do you get a lot of pushback from stakeholders who say, look, this needs to be implemented in this timeline, and you've come in, you said, no, the plan is not right, strategic decisions need to be there. Do you get a lot of pushback there, and how do you deal with that?
I think it depends who you've got. I think one of the things that we'll go through is having the right support from senior stakeholders, because the projects are never smooth. ERP projects are a really hard thing to do. It's probably one of the hardest things that I have ever implemented. And from my perspective, it's just making sure that you can pivot, you have the right support network, you've got enough flexibility within the organization to be able to pivot to support the organization in the right direction. Then you've got what you need to make project a success. If you don't have that and you've got very rigid rules around you, no, this is the timeline, this is the rule book by which you need to operate, then it keeps you within those boundaries that you can't step out of. And quite often that's when sacrifice on quality can occur, or some unsafe decisions could be made, which is not the right thing for any organization in my mind. So if you get somebody who is doing this job with a lot of experience and they give you advice, my advice to the organizations is to listen to those people, because they know what they're talking about. So, and there are always more than one way to approach a situation. So there are always options to make, but obviously, it's for the organization to make those decisions at the end of the day.
Yeah. What are the earliest warning signs that a program is starting to drift?
Yeah, so you will know pretty earlier on. So it depends when the project manager will join the project. So let's say the project manager will join at the mobilization stage. The SI gets onboarded, you get the plan baselined, and everyone is on the same page in terms of what needs to be done. The first thing that you would do is stepping into design phase, and the design phase where you start discovering things that perhaps a bit more complex, not quite in line with what originally planned, so it's not quite straightforward. So at this point is where you start making those decisions, and those decisions are very critical because quite often you can go down the rabbit hole and try to make the solution fit every convoluted scenario they could possibly think of. And that's where things start to drift and the project started to slip. So that's where you just need to start nailing those things down and say, right, so we can either do this or we can do this. And hopefully the decisions can be made in the right and take the project in the right direction without further slips, because you can always have a backlog. You can always look at things from different directions. People do this every day. Every organization has some sort of ERP system. There are hundreds of thousands of people who implemented Fusion, for example. So you can always have a look how people adopted solution in different ways. So you don't have to make it bespoke to the way you do this, because everyone does AP, everyone does AR. You're not special in any way. So I think it's important to keep the project on pace. But of course, if there are exceptions to this rule, you just need to make strategic decisions and then adjust accordingly. But yeah, design phase is the first one. The other areas I would say is the data migration. So, it's normally, people want to migrate absolutely everything they've had. And if they've had system for absolutely donkey's years, they want to migrate the entirety of the HR data, finance data, and so on. And that's where complexity lies, because it's not just like for like. You need to do multiple transformations. You need to do 3, 4, 5 data migration cycles. They're not easy. And you need to get them down to a shorter period of time as you can. So that's the bit that I find is a bit of a drum bit for the program plan.
So what's an average span of data migration? Like how long you said 5 types of data migration there, how long would one take on average?
So it depends. So when you start with the first one, because that's your first opportunity to do the data migrations, do the transformation for the first time, you test your templates, you load, you reconcile. So it could be anything from weeks to a couple of months. Sometimes it depends how much data you migrate. And the organizations who make really pragmatic decisions and say, we're only migrating open items or starting balances, we're not going to migrate the detail, for example, of all the POs that we had, or do really strong data cleansing, so you don't have uncleansed data there. That's where you actually can reduce that significantly. So the less data you have, the more successful and straightforward your implementation will be. So yeah, but ultimately you want to get down to weeks, if not days, for data migration, because obviously you want to keep the blackout period when you take the one system down and you bring another system up. That period of downtime you want to keep as little as possible, but that's basically the data migration would be the fattest part of that exercise,
particularly if you've got 5 or 6 data migrations.
Yeah, I mean, those would align. You would basically finish one, you will start another one, you will start another one. You're just trying to make it as zero errors as possible. So you're trying to make it as streamlined and as short as possible. That's why you're constantly doing this. And there is a data cleansing in between as well. So those resources who focus on data migration and cleansing are so important to the project success.
Would you say the most common reason for why programs derail is it comes down to technology or how it's adopted within the company?
Yeah, so good question, actually. So implementing system itself is an easy bit. We can put one in a couple of months, but the translation of the off-the-shelf product to individual organization with its complexities and deviations, and it requires huge commitment from the organization and ability to say, okay, so we used to do it like this, now we need to do it like this. So what kind of things can we do differently, and what is the appetite for that change? So the more pragmatic and open group of people you can have in that space, you can say, okay, we can absolutely do that, and we will make sure we'll bring the business on the journey to adopt that is a successful program in my mind. It's already got that foundation. They can make it an easier journey for everyone involved. So yeah, I think the calm work stream leads, very experienced, who have done it on different implementations, is a big win for the program, to have those people leading the work streams and consulting with stakeholders and calming things down, because ERP programs are extremely stressful. So yeah, if you've got a lot of experience in that space, yeah, you will have a very good journey ahead of you.
So you emphasize people-centric delivery there. How early should change management really start in this process then?
So in my experience, I've seen, programs where project managers, advocate for change management as early as possible. However, because of the budget situation, or people didn't think about it early enough, change managers get parachuted in, just sort out the training and go live comms. And poor change managers are trying to get their head around, who are my stakeholders? What are the key messages I need to portray? What training do we need? Because you need to go out and recruit somebody, or you need to hire a training delivery partner. It's not something you can turn around in a sixpence. So you really need to start as early as possible. So those shining examples of the projects where I felt like we've done a really, really good job, change managers started before me. So, they were already there, embedded in the team.
Yeah.
They worked with key stakeholders. They understood the organization and, what is going on in the wider landscape. So once the program starts, they'll over the design, they understand the change impacts assessments, current as is process versus to be processes, what the gaps are there, how we're going to address those gaps, whether it's comms, it's engagement, whether it's training, whether there is something else we need to do. They mobilize business change champions. They have those networks of people, and they've got tons of collateral, and they're so good at finding the right groups of people to talk to. Those programs are a true success. So for me, there is no early, as early as possible. Don't save on this. Yeah.
A definitive difference between programs that have started change management prior to you coming in to afterwards. Like, has the ones prior to you coming in, have they been more successful post go live?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes. Because, the last program I worked on, we had business change champions. We had the most incredible group of people who were just within the business, would alleviate any anxieties from the business. They would be coming into all of the sessions that we were running post go live, and once we've left, they carried on the torch of that knowledge, and passing the messages and training on. That's just an incredible thing to do. So yeah, definitely.
Do you ever find yourself almost checking back in once you've left the project?
Always. Yeah. It's like, when you work somewhere, so the projects are normally quite long, that it's anything from 18 to 24 months sometimes, and sometimes even longer. So you bond with people and they're like your children. So I never truly leave. I do always check in with my ex-colleagues, and yeah, I want to know that they have been successful and things are going well there. So yeah, I never leave them.
So obviously the main role of a ERP program director is just keeping everything on track. So when a program starts to feel a little loose, what's the first thing you go in and tighten, and why is that?
Great question, actually. So for me, where I find the project sometimes is not quite on track is where you've got ambiguities. Who does what we're doing, when are we doing it? So for me, getting the plan sorted, governance mobilized, so people have a clear ways of escalating their concerns, because something can start as a conversation and, and then translate into something quite big. So we need to have an opportunity to scope it out, package it, and pass it on to the right person to deal with. Have clear roles and responsibilities. So things like RACI and, shared across the team, who's responsible, who owns which document, who's running certain meetings, who's capturing actions, who's taking them away, what's the ETA for each action. As much clarity as you can to mobilize it from the very start, it sets the pathway for the rest of the project. So that's almost like a foundation for this strong building of the ERP program. Once you get that right, anything that comes to you, you can sort of jump on it and make it your priority to resolve. So the key thing is just to dedicate the right attention for yourself and also the key stakeholders. So locking people in the room, working through what we can do. There is normally options to discuss. Sometimes it's only one way to address a certain issue, but you need to give it your full attention, escalate it, and make the right decisions and move on. It has to be fast.
One major project you were on was the ERP transformation for the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea. What made that program particularly complex from a delivery perspective?
So the project at Kensington and Chelsea has been an interesting one because we've moved this from shared service. There was a bit of a burning platform in terms of the timescales that we had to move off that platform. There are multiple stakeholders, multiple boroughs involved. So I think because of that, it was quite a complex, stakeholder environment, and the timescales were quite stringent. So we had to operate within a certain deadlines and so on. But I think from our perspective, it was just quite a good opportunity to, to spread the wings of the business change team. So they were working really hard to get that sorted. But it's the stakeholder environment and tight timescales that made it quite challenging. But a very interesting program. Actually, I really enjoyed it, and it's one of my absolute favorites to have been involved with. So,
and what sort of disciplines mattered most for keeping things on track within such a tight time schedule?
So we had really, really strong governance. We had multiple governance bodies. We had incredible sponsor, actually. So we had a single sponsor and we had a wider sponsors within the wider organization. We had incredible leadership. So Chief Exec was an incredible support to us as well. So just having the right governance, right support from senior stakeholders. And also if we escalated something, there was so much support. So my program director was incredible to address any issues, because you identify an issue and you need to do something with it. So you can get the right people around you, you can find the solution, but program managers are not magicians. We can highlight the pathway to green, but we can't make it happen on our own. So having that right support from right people is absolutely critical. And I had that, which made it an absolute joy, actually. So, yeah.
Would you say you've had similar support on previous programs you've done? Or was this the one with the most support, most governance that you felt confident with?
I think it's just different. It just felt really different. Different organizations have different ways of support and different structures. And, it's just that particular one felt like it had the right amount of support. But yeah, you don't get that often. So in some instances you do, in some instances you don't, and you're just going to have to make it work. But when you do have that wrap around you, so you actually can do your job effectively, that really, really helps.
I suppose you've got to a stage where you can come in and you've identified within a day or two that, okay, I'm going to have this support or I'm not going to have this support. You kind of know what you're in for.
Exactly. And sometimes it's, it's articulating things in the right way as well. You need to ask for help and formulate it in the right way. I think that's very important. And, if you see gaps, highlight those gaps and say it would help us to have this extra governance body. You need to make sure the things are formulated and come to you from the business in the right way. So you might want to add additional things that work for you specifically to make this a success. But yeah, I think it worked really well there.
We stick with the Kensington and Chelsea program here. So how did you judge when it was truly ready to go live? Like, yep, we're ready, let's do it. What was your factors for that?
Yeah, so that because it was such a complex environment with so many moving parts, we had quite a lengthy preparation for go live. You have readiness criteria that you work on. You have exit gates, and we had more than two, I think. So, and you basically temperature check at each gateway to say how we're doing. So you would have a big gateways, but you also have a weekly, bi-weekly check-ins. We monitored that really quite carefully, actually, and every deviation from where we needed to be, we all jumped to get that sorted. So yeah, it was very robust. And of course, it's not only getting the solution ready, it's almost making organization ready. It's making sure that all component parts were ready to go. And I think it's just not just for this project, it's for any project. I don't think you're truly ready to go live. I think you can make the best effort to get to a certain point, and you need to be absolutely clear that the solution will be safe. So, as long as solution is tested, you've got your cutover plan, you've got dry run completed, you know exactly what to do, who will do it. You've got minute by minute plan, and we had thousands of lines in our cutover plan. You have to make a decision, get everyone around the table and say, are we good? And if people say, yeah, as much as we can be, then you're good to go. But if there are serious concerns, then you need to really seriously listen to what people are raising as their concerns and get those resolved. Because it's very important, you're launching this system. There is a lot of things that could go wrong. So you just need to be very, very careful there.
Was there any surprises post go live at all?
I think some of the changes from the way system worked before to how a system worked after, I think we've put quite a bit of effort there to do post go live support, and that ran for a couple of months after go live. So I think that when people start using system in anger, I think that's where people ask questions, and we provided quite a bit of support in that space. But I think from our perspective, no, you're just mobilizing the right support, mobilizing the right managed service and target operating model that will take it forward. I don't think there were any surprises. No, it's just having the right team to pick it up post go live. I did stay, and so is the change team stayed for a while just to make sure that transition has been smooth. So yeah, I don't think there was anything unexpected, I wouldn't say.
Have you checked back on on that program at all?
Yeah.
Anything still
I
okay?
still keep in touch. Yeah.
Excellent.
The team are doing good. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So, Tanya, we'd like to save these last few questions for just more sharing your insight and advice with listeners. So if you had to distill it down, what are your 3 most important factors for keeping a program on track?
So 3 most important ones. I would say that you would keep your plan going. So make sure you monitor your plan. You just see that the mood of the team are is good. So there is it can be quite stressful making sure everyone is doing what they need to do, and you're hitting all the key milestones. And yeah, I think from the SI perspective, the SI are delivering what they expected to do in terms of their quality. I think if you've got those 3 key areas on track, you will be okay. Yeah.
What advice would you give to someone stepping into the role of an ERP program manager for the first time?
So I would say if you have an opportunity to work with somebody who has been in those shoes before, do that. just work with somebody who has delivered it, because nothing like it. Watching somebody who has faced this from different directions, ask questions, watch what they do, steal all their templates. It's very important. Don't create things from scratch. Those guys have done it many times, and when they steal, it's in the nicest possible way, because normally those people will give them away and say, it worked for me for years, use it. Get involved, don't shy away from detail. So, I like to know what's going on in each phase. It might be feeling a little bit daunting, getting involved in the technical discussions, data migration discussions, but you will never know unless you get involved. Listen to conversations, ask questions, get involved. I think we talked about ask questions. There is no such thing as silly questions. Everyone approaches this from their years and years of experience. They talk shorthand. You wouldn't necessarily understand it until you do understand it. So therefore learn it and ask questions and, get involved. And don't bypass governance, because quite often when there is a really busy times, time pressure, there is always that desire, shall we forget about this gateway? Shall we forget about, shall we just overlap the phases and so on? The governance and those gateways are there for a reason. Make sure you've got them, signed off in the right way. There is always flexibility, of course, but don't skip them altogether, and make sure you keep the project on track, aligned to the plan, because if the slippage is there, and don't keep it to yourself, highlight it to senior stakeholders, as escalate, get them sorted, because quite often you just don't have the right resources to do the right things within the project plan. So therefore, if you've got a slippage, shout about it, make sure it gets sorted, because otherwise the project will get, will slow down and will get impacted on the quality and overall timelines. And that's where slippage come in. So yeah, 4 or 5 things there, but I think it's enough for somebody to think about how it will work for them.
Excellent advice. Tanya, you've been a brilliant guest. You've shared such practical view on what it takes to keep ERP programs on track, from early warning signs all the way through to post go live. And hopefully that will resonate with anyone involved in ERP delivery today. So thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me, Ryan. It's been great.
Yes, thanks, Tanya. And thank you all for listening. And we'll see you on the next episode.